Hello and welcome to Partners in Business, the National College of Ireland summer series of interviews with business leaders focusing on partnership and collaboration and what that really means as the lived experience of a business person. Because I think we hear a lot of lip service, I suppose, about collaboration, and we also hear an awful lot about the entrepreneur and how the entrepreneur maybe is kind of presented sometimes as standing alone. And how those two things play out is interesting. We're here at the Kelly Theatre in the heart of the IFSC in Dublin's Docklands. I am Donal O'Donovan, I'm the business editor of the Irish Independent, and I am delighted to be joined by one of Ireland's leading tech entrepreneurs, tech veteran at this stage, I suppose, Maurice Healy. Maurice founded his first company back around 1990? 93, and has successfully developed a large number of technology businesses, startups, emerging businesses, listing in Dublin on the AIM and in the London Main over the years. Very familiar with companies like Calix and Alfira. Maurice's main interest at the moment, or big focus, is Glantis, which was established in 2014. It's already internationalised. I suppose that's an interesting part of this story is how quickly that's happening, kind of to actually kick off. Do you want to talk a bit about Glantis then? What is Glantis, and maybe to place that business now, and what that, how much of that is about what you've learned over the last 30 years almost in business?
Yeah, I suppose, well, first of all, just maybe explain what Glantis does. So in companies and organizations at the moment, one of the biggest problems they have, or one of the biggest problems we identified, was the fact that a lot of them have so many disparate systems, internal systems, they've got legacy systems, new systems. This doesn't matter what size the company is. They're working with a HR system, a CRM system, and one of the biggest challenges is that often these systems don't talk to each other. They also can't extract the data from these systems to get one insight, one view of all of the information and knowledge they have, so that they can create insights and better plan and strategize the way forward for the company. So we identify this as a problem. For many companies, the way out of it is to maybe put in one new system, but that involves a lot of risk, a lot of cost, a lot of time. So we developed a platform that can connect these systems, at least extract the data from these systems into one central area, so you can get one view of everything. So that was one part of what we did. So it's now possible very quickly to bring all your data together in one place. The second piece, of course, when anybody gets that kind of data and they create insights, there are generally actions that they want to take based on those insights. So we developed a second part of the platform which automates actions. So again, it's something that you create the insights, you tell it what to do, the system does it for you. The third part was to create a BI piece, dashboards, management reports, all of that kind of thing, so it all flows through into that for management. And the last part was to take in data science, look at advanced analytics, predictive analytics, using artificial intelligence, machine learning, that type of thing. So it's the only platform in the world that has all of those four elements in one place. And what's really nice about it, and then I'll finish with the end of this pitch on Glantis, but what's really nice about it is that there's a real-time bus that goes through it. So all the things I'm talking about doing, you can now do real-time. So you can actually make the decisions on the hoof with this. So somebody can go onto the system and find out what's happening in their organization at any stage, real time. So we, as you said, we started in 2014, but we didn't actually bring the product to market until about 2017. And thankfully, so far, it's been well received.
So part of what you're describing there is integrating systems that maybe companies have been putting together or buying or building over 30 years or 40 years, 50 years. So if you go back 30 years, 25 years, how did you get involved in the technology sector first?
So I was a late bloomer, and then I wilted very quickly when I came to technology. I went to college first, into Trinity College, and did computer science when I was 29 years of age. Before that, I was a bookmaker, and I think I spent a bit of time painting and decorating as well. It's pretty terrible at everything. And so I did a degree in computer science.
Why? What at 29? Why did you think, or 28? Why did you think this is what I'm going to do now?
The whole area of bookmaking was becoming computerized at that stage, and I got involved in that side of things, putting systems together. I started programming my own systems for my own business and that, working on it, and I enjoyed it. I really liked it, so I wanted to take it to another level. I wasn't sure at that stage how far it would take me, but I just took to the whole area of computers and programming, and it went on from there.
And you came out, you merged from Trinity. You lectured in Trinity for a while.
I lectured in Trinity for about 4 years, and I'm sure we have some students in here as well. So it became necessary to stop doing that when the students coming in knew a lot more than I did. When the answer to every question was, that's an excellent question, now leave that with me and we'll get to that at some point in the future. And then I had to run home and say, what the hell were they talking about? So,
was that just the technology was changing quickly?
It was incredible. When I was doing a master's, and what I was lecturing on was a thing called computer telephony integration. CTI was called CSTA, Computer Supported Telephony Application. The idea of linking phone calls with the desktop of someone, so screen popping and all of that, it was revolutionary. And then security was coming in, and just at a point 4 years into that, mobiles became more advanced. There was a lot more data going through it, and all the things we were working on just became normal. They were already available on smartphones were coming in, and that, and things were coming out of the box, where what we were lecturing on and what I was studying was about really intricately putting things together, and suddenly they were just appearing out of the box.
So you went into business?
Yeah, the only thing, there's no other job for me since all my technology skills were no longer needed. So I went into business. So we started with telephony, doing telephony maintenance and telephone systems, and because of my background we then acquired a computer business, because I was going to go to all of these big organizations and say, we've got the computers, we've got the telephony, we'll put it together. And I remember one of the first companies I went to with this great idea was to AIB Bank, and soon I discovered at that time, I'm sure it's all different now, was that the telephony crowd were over here and the IT crowd were over here. And not only did they not talk, they didn't like each other particularly well either. So trying to get everybody to work on an integrated system, was difficult at that time. So I ended up running a computer business and a telephony business, and so that's how I grew my knowledge of both.
And that was ITG?
That was ITG.
So I know you're sort of self-deprecating, but so you're on the kind of the computer science end of it. You saw the opportunity. You're looking at integrating telecoms and computing, traditional computing. So you're on the ground floor really for basically a revolution that's about to change commerce completely.
Yeah, so we're there, and the technologies are starting to come together. There are other areas that are expanding into it. But from the point of view of building a business and developing it, even in that, I mean, the idea, when you start a business and you'll go in with an idea and a plan and you'll say, right, this is where it's going to go. And very quickly you realize that doesn't always quite work out as you expected. So I remember when we were doing the telephony side, we were independent. The I in IT was independent. So the whole idea was we're going to be an alternative to your original provider of technology. And we did the same on the IT side. And you hit a ceiling very quickly. So I think we got up to a few $100,000 in turnover, and then you're suddenly, it's harder. The next 50 grand is hard, next 100 grand is harder to get there. So you have to come up with other ideas, and that's what led us into the first acquisition around that time. But there were other things changed as well. I mean, we were waving the independent flag. Then we won a deal with a Watsu. So all our stuff which said, don't be screwed by your original provider, we tore up and said, we're now your original provider, stick with us. So you have to have that agility when you're trying to grow a business, and you have to look at the opportunities. And one of the ones that became before us was a small business. The chap who owned it was retiring. Very small, I think he had about 60 customers. So we acquired that business for what we thought were the contracts. but suddenly you had an extra 60 customers, which had come in as part of this. The phone started ringing that much more. The other pieces around the business started to come in, and suddenly you realize this can be sometimes a lot easier than trying to grow organically.
Right. What was that business, the first business you bought?
It was, I'm trying to remember, it had Bell Communications. They had the reason I remember it so well, apart from the fact that it was the first, it was also they had the name of this huge American company.
I was going to say, they weren't Bell Communications.
No, it was one guy and 60 customers.
Right.
But he had that name. Now, obviously, we had to drop the name, but he was getting away with it for quite a long time.
And the insight from that was essentially you can grow fast and you can build scale.
Yeah, I think there is a thing about acquisitions, to those interested in the acquisitions piece. I see acquisitions as an accelerator. You can't depend on acquisitions. Your underlying business must be trending the right way. It must be built on solid foundations. So if you've got a business and you're growing it, and acquisitions are a really good way of accelerating that growth. But if your underlying business isn't strong enough, you know, the acquisitions tend not to work because you're looking for synergies, you're looking for growth, you're looking for added value for your customers. So it's kind of important that it's built on a solid foundation.
How many deals do you think you've closed over the years buying companies to add to companies?
North of 50, 60,
yeah.
Around that. And they're all, I mean, there are fundamentals among each of them, but then they're all quite different. I mean, there's a lot of phases and stages through acquisitions. They're never easy. And there are, even the ones that look the most simple, somehow or other speed bumps appear along the way. On the legal side, the due diligence side, things like that. So
Atlantis now, people obviously know then in the industry that you're a person who will look at a deal, who will look to close a deal, who has an eye for M&A. So presumably you get pitched.
Yeah, I think that is one of the advantages of us doing deals for such a long time. People tend to bring us deals. So any given week, probably 8 to 10 potential deals would come across our desk, and but you know, 95% of them won't fit our criteria.
Who brings them in? Who brings potential deals to you?
Again, it would be, there are brokers around who work with you know, maybe large accountancy firms and that, and they filter the deals into the brokers, and we'd be known to them, and they like dealing with us because it's a yes or no very quickly. When I say yes or no to go to the next stage. And we have a history of closing deals, so we're a good target for these guys. But then again, you know, when you're around as long as me and as old as me, you've got a lot of contacts and a network, so people will know what we're doing, and if they see something they think might be even remotely interested, they tend to send it on to us anyway.
And on the flip side, do you have kind of spoofers coming in trying to sell you their magical idea or their?
Not really. And I think this is, again, if anybody is embarking on a mergers and acquisitions strategy as part of their business development, the first thing you have to do is set out your criteria. You have to know why you want to buy a business. It's not a flaky thing. It's not something that somebody will come in and say, like, you could see an absolutely fantastic business, but it doesn't fit the criteria, and it doesn't fit where the direction you're going with the business. So it's really difficult for anyone to come along and spoof anything, because it doesn't matter what they bring in. It either fits the criteria, it doesn't. And then once you've looked at it and you said, okay, we'd like some more information or whatever, then you'll get that information. Again, you can identify if there's anomalies there. And we're skilled at looking at a balance sheet now, so you know, we'd know if there was something wrong. And then it takes us to meeting the potential vendor. And
how important is that, sitting down with the vendor?
It's massive. It's absolutely huge, because, I mean, this is partners in business, and it's not always a long-term partnership with somebody when you're acquiring a company. But for the period of that project, of that acquisition, it is the most essential relationship. So you kind of, as I said, if we get, whatever I said, 300 or 400 opportunities, and we look at 20 in a year, 10 of them could go in just that meeting. An acquisition, the process is tricky, as I said earlier on.
So that's about half. It's about half the deals
Half
that
of
you're
them
actually
just
looking at
on the
will
basis
just fall out of bed.
you're sitting across from somebody, and the first thing you've got to try and figure out is it going to be possible to get a deal done with this person?
Right.
And you're going into it for the first time. We're all different, so these people are different. They're coming from family businesses, PLCs, partnerships, individual owners. So you never know what you're going to come across.
Yeah.
When you sit in front of them. I may have had some bizarre ones. I went to one in Scotland. It looked good on paper, and I went up. It was a little town outside Ayr, and your man asked me if I'd meet him at his house. So I said, fine. So I went to his house. He was a guy, he lived on his own. I went in, sat down. It was kind of a dark place. The next thing, it's just him and a cat, and he's talking to me, and he sit down, we shoot the breeze for a few minutes, and then he starts picking up the cat. And it's like, James Bond or something. He's running the cat saying, this guy's come from Ireland, puss. He wants to buy our business. Do you think we should sell our business? And then he's lifting up the can going, what do you think, puss? Do you think we should sell this business?
So what did you do?
So I refused to eat or drink anything. I looked around. First of all, am I being punked here? Or am I in danger here? So, politely brought the...
But you'd looked at the books at that point. You'd looked at that company.
No, his company was actually quite good. I was going to try and make a joke about I was within a whisker of buying it, but I'll scrap that one. But no, and he did actually have a good business, but you knew, in talking to him, and when he was getting strategic advice from a cat, it was going to be quite difficult to get the deal to the end of the line.
Because at that point, you were still looking at lots and lots of hurdles to get that deal, even if he was going to be gone within the...
Yeah, I mean, the very minute, so even if you sit down with somebody, you think you can get it done, you're then into the next phase, which is negotiation. So how do you get to a number? And even if you've agreed a number with somebody, and you think you've got a deal done, at that stage, at best, you're 50% towards 50% chance of getting a deal done, because from there you've got to go into a share purchase agreement or an asset purchase agreement. You've got legal due diligence, financial due diligence. There's always going to be bits and pieces at the end, and that's why, to your original question, that relationship, that first meeting, and trying to assess whether you can get a deal done with this person is crucial, because so many things can happen during the deal. And if that peer-to-peer relationship, the two principles in the business, if that relationship isn't strong, and again to partnerships, and I guess it's any partnerships, the area of trust, it becomes really important, respect becomes important, and communication becomes important. And
But that's a difficult relationship, because as the two principles, the vendor wants the best price and you want the best price, and they're not necessarily the same thing. And that's kind of presumably overhanging all of that dialogue all the time anyway.
Yeah, and I think, the pricing part and the valuation, you get to fairly quickly.
Right.
We would have, now depending on the type of deal, we'd have a formula by which we'll go. It could be a multiple of EBITDA, it could be a multiple of recurring revenue, or some do it by turnover. You have your criteria. So once you have the numbers, you can very quickly, and I'm not a coy, again, everybody has their own negotiating skills. Nothing here that I'm telling you are universal truths, they're just my experiences. But my experience has said, don't be afraid. There was this adage, he who speaks first loses.
Right.
It's rubbish. You need to get a number on the table as quickly as possible. You need to build up trust with the with the vendor. So
And you don't care if it's you or them who puts the number out
no,
there?
if it looks like it's going nowhere, I'll throw our number out.
Yeah.
And you're then just trying to get into the ballpark. If the meeting can end very quickly if, you know, they're looking 3x that or 4x that. But if they're looking for, you know, 20, 30, 40% more than that, then okay, let's see how we can make it work. Let's look at the balance sheet. Let's look at some other things and see if we can come up. Maybe a bit gets deferred. There are different ways then you can get there if you're in the ballpark.
Yeah.
But if you're, you know, if you're miles off, then you kind of get up, shake hands, and say we'll do it another day. And you tend to know those things as well. There are certain phrases somebody uses. When anybody says to me when I meet them the first time, "We're on the cusp," it's unlikely we're going to agree a price because we can only deal with the numbers that are in front of us.
Yeah.
And they're already telling me how great it's going to be in future years. So you get markers like that and signs like that.
So the price, the big number that as a journalist, the thing I always chase in an M&A situation, that's not overhanging or overshadowing the process at all for you. It's out there in the open, and it's either game on or game off. Yeah,
and that's the very first go no go is that price. And as I said, maybe it's an age thing as well. You've done this dance so many times.
Yeah.
You're just happy to put the number out there. This is where we are, and you move on. But again, you know, from your point of view, once you get into the final number can be different to that number, because when you get into the area of doing due diligence, then you know there could be anomalies in the balance sheet that have to be affected intercompany. There's so many different things that come up. The definition of recurring revenue can be an issue. So lots of different things can come up. But generally speaking, if everybody has been straight, it winds up more or less where you began.
And who is everybody? So in an M&A situation, there's obviously the principals who kind of eyeball each other in that early meeting, and then lots of other people have to get involved with due diligence.
Yeah, so you've got, so there are two types of due diligence, and then there's the share purchase agreement, and then there's a whole load of warranties. So the legal side is quite complex, and then you've the financial due diligence. So in a financial due diligence, if it's a simple one, so the deal we did a couple of months ago, we did that due diligence ourselves. Our CFO, she went in and she dug into it and figured everything out and gave it the green light from a due diligence point of view. If it's a very complex one and a large organization, you might bring in some corporate advisor or one of the big accountancy firms or a accountancy firm and bring them in and have a third party verify a lot of things. The legal side of it is tricky because, first of all, the legal due diligence, and that's around, you know, there are a lot of threats in that. First of all, are the covenants okay? They own the shares in the first place. And then you've got things, you know, are there any legal actions? And anything out there that could come back and bite you later on. So that's kind of one of the ones you'd want. And you really depend heavily on your legal advisors there, and that's very strong. When it comes to the share purchase agreement, where you're kind of looking at the structure of the deal, organizing the how much you're paying for it, other conditions attached to that, and then you're looking at warranties and stuff. That's where the principle to principle I talked about earlier becomes really important, because lawyers can get caught up in that SPA, and I guess we all know that there are going to be certain points, are going to be a bun fight at different stages, and if you leave too much to the lawyers, they can start fighting and delivering messages back to the vendor and to the purchaser saying these crowd are a shower, they're unreasonable, they're this, they're that. And a deal
because in fairness, they're being paid to find problems, so they'll find problems.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, let's be fair, I suppose they are trying to protect, but it becomes, unlike the legal due diligence, which is very much, you know, protect in every way, the SPA is a negotiation, so it can become a bit of a game. You know, will we win this point? Will we win that point? And so you've got to kind of make sure that the lawyers understand when there is something contentious or something bring it back to the principal, let the principal sort it out.
Yeah.
Because deals can go very sour if trust is gone, respect is gone, or somebody feels that somebody is being a bit too clever.
Yeah. Do you tend to use the same legal firms and the same brokers, the same financial advisors?
Yeah, well, yes and no. It's horses for courses as well. So again, the style of the size of the deal and the complexity of the deal would determine a larger firm, because you need specialist areas in HR and leases, and now you need it in data and GDPR and compliance and those areas, health and safety. So if it's a really complex deal and you need to cover yourself, you'll probably go with a larger firm so you can get these specialist areas.
Under the roof.
But smaller ones, again, we would have small firms that we use, that we trust, that can, will cut through things quickly. But remember, that's on your side.
Yeah.
That's on our side. So in a vendor situation, you have no control over the legals that they use. So again, if they've got someone experienced in doing that, then the process can go along very smoothly. If they've got somebody who isn't really experienced, then every line becomes a negotiation, and that can be just so tedious, long drawn out, and fraught with difficulties.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've had to say to someone, look, your lawyers are the problem here. You and I are getting on fine. We think our lawyers are doing fine, but your lawyers are
frequently
wearing this deal out.
Yeah, frequently. But similarly, I've had to say.
And how does that go down? I mean, because in a way, that's a criticism of them and how they're approaching the deal.
Well, the only you've got to be careful, because I mean you can't throw the other lawyer under the bus, or because you're still going to be needing to work with that person. But often you'll kind of try to have you'll try to do a lawyer-to-lawyer thing as well. That'll be where your first one go, let's be reasonable, we all know where this is going type of thing. But you'll also look at just bringing the parties together. A recent transaction, there were, actually, I might as well say the last one we just did, there was emails flying around on the penultimate day of the deal. We're supposed to be closing the next day, and the lawyers had suddenly, there were several lawyers involved for different reasons, Irish, English, and that, and I had to send an email to all lawyers saying, would you all stand down now, stop communicating, I'll talk to the vendor and we'll come back with instructions. So that actually just happened in the deal we just did.
And that's the night before the deal closed?
It was the day before, it was the morning. We woke up one morning, we seemed to be making good progress. One lawyer sent an email, sparked another one. Somebody in Ireland got the hump about something, and suddenly there was this whole chaos going on. And I mean, when I did speak to the vendor, we kind of resolved it. We had a quick conference call with a couple of other parties involved. And I think we resolved it in probably 10 minutes, went back, and then everything went back to nice and calm again, and we got there.
Buying a company is only the start of the process, so if we're talking about collaboration and integration, so you've gone through all of that, and now 50 times you've come through the other side of it, and you've got a new company that you've got to somehow integrate into your existing business. So what do you do?
And that's, and in the best, I guess in an ideal world, you would try to get to the management team. Now, sometimes the management team might be the vendors, in which case it's not as big a problem, but mostly they're not. So you're trying to get meetings as part of the process with the management team as early as you can.
Which is almost an operational due diligence.
Exactly. So you can sit down, you can go through, you can explain your business. You're trying to get them on board and part of the process, and already looking at the various areas. Now, you get different types of acquisitions. There's an acquisition where everybody is going to be staying, and then you can have an acquisition where it may mean that there aren't roles for everybody in the organization. So, and
inevitably people are going to be nervous because they won't know till afterwards.
Absolutely. So when you know as the purchaser what the story is, you've got to communicate that as quickly as you can. So you've got to get rid of fear and fretting out of the organization. But mainly you're trying to get them on board. And you work processes. We've got our own team are very experienced in doing that, including people, breaking people off into groups, getting them used to it. But so even now with the one we've just done, that's, handy enough. We're there, we're communicating all the time, there's daily communications, we're working together, coming up with new ideas, new marketing approaches, all of that, and that works really well in a small organization. Sometimes, as you get bigger and you get bigger organizations, you're not always on top of it. You think you are, but you're not. I remember we did an acquisition in Holland, in Amsterdam one time. They had a very good MD, a bit quirky, but he was a good guy. And we thought it was going really well. And about 3 or 4 months into it, the MD came on to me and he said, listen, I want you to come over and I want you to meet the team. So I'm going to do an exercise before you come. Now this sounds a bit weird. He was quirky, I'll tell you that. So what he organized was that the people in the organization would do a drawing or a painting to represent how they felt the acquisition had gone. I did say he's quirky. So okay, he said, you come over and you judge it. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went across, and I've just realized that the ending of this story is maybe not appropriate. So I'll tell you, halfway through the story, I realized the ending was. So I'll tell you what, when I'll use rhyming slang, and you can work it out for yourselves, okay? So I got there, and they'd done these paintings. So the person I gave the prize to had done a painting. I'd say it's the size of those middle doors there. All kinds of colors, font sizes. I mean, it must have taken days. And all that was written in like all over the place, these things was duck, 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 duck. The whole painting was just that. I gave him the prize, and clearly that integration was not going well when that's what the whole acquisition meant to that guy. So trying to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on post an acquisition is really important, because it's not, you've got to win the minds and hearts.
Presumably some acquisitions are integrations. You buy a business and you just fold it in, and some are satellites, and I guess like that Dutch example, that are always a little bit outside the business and maybe can get peripheral. They
can become peripheral, and even when when they're satellite like that, so you're immediately, often you're into a rebranding. You can be changing the products. You can be, maybe taking a different approach to the value proposition for the customer. And also they've now got another line of reporting, so they may be reporting back to people in Dublin or London, and things just get lost somewhere in the middle, and people become frustrated in the acquired company. They feel they're not being respected, they feel that they're not being listened to, and they become demotivated, and the impact on the business can be quite severe. As I said, quirky and all as it was, those paintings, we realized there was something wrong, and it was 3 or 4 months in when it happened. So
when you say something was wrong, productivity was, the product was still being produced presumably, and the customers were still paying. So what was it
so
that had gone
you
wrong?
won't notice something like that till you got through a full cycle maybe. But the basic problem was morale.
Yeah.
The idea that they had been acquired and they felt they were being talked to.
Yeah.
That they were being told to do this, that their opinions didn't matter. They would feel they knew the market, they knew the customers, and yet here's this big arrogant Cork guy coming in telling them how they should be running a business that they were running for 20 years quite successfully.
Yeah.
And so you can impact morale, and once you impact morale, then that quickly, that can be reflected very quickly in revenues and profitability.
So what did you do? At that point, at least you knew there was a problem. You'd identified the problem, and they'd identified the problem and communicated it to you, I guess, in quirky a way as it was.
Well, on that very day when we did the paintings and when I saw that, then we organised the session for the end of the day. We took people out, had a few beers and started socialising and picking data. Then we put a team together from Dublin and from Amsterdam, and their job was to take all of the views and opinions and come up with a way where all voices were heard, and everybody felt involved.
Because you bought that business presumably because you thought it was a good business that was well managed and you liked it.
Yeah, and you know, you learn over the years. There's not a mission to be doing something like doing that as badly as we did then, and it's experience that comes along. I mean, the number of times acquisitions are done where in trying to integrate, you actually kill the thing that the reason you bought it for. You can actually kill the most valuable piece of a business. And, you know, again, you lose sometimes. In our business, you know, there's services, we have software and that, but we consulting, we're going in working with people, and the people involved, if you can't get those people on board in an acquisition, that itself will kill a business because they know it. And it's one of the things in business, again, you know, it's one of the trite comments that kind of irritates me a bit because it's true, but it's used in such a silly way. You know, people say, you know, people are our biggest assets. And but it's used in a kind of a PR, trite kind of way. And my twist on that is that people make you money. Mm-hmm. So you're asked because they make you money. And if you look at your business and you think, if I can get the best person possible in each of those areas of the business, then I'm going to have a very successful business because people make you money and the best people make you the most money.
Yeah. In terms of the other, you know, we're talking about collaboration, and you've collaborated with lots of people over the years through a whole mix of businesses. Are there people who've been on that journey, if you like, all the way through? Are there people who would maybe have been involved in 2 or more companies with you, or different projects at different times?
Yeah, for their sins.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, over the years, you know, the team we have at the moment, we've got a really good mixture of experience and youth and young people. A lot of the experienced heads in the business have worked with me before, and despite that fact, they still said that they'd join me on this journey as well.
So are they people you would have identified in different companies as those companies were sort of
yeah, where we'd have lost contact, they'd have gone on with another company.
Yeah.
If I'd sold a company, IPO'd a company, or whatever would have happened. So when I'm doing something like that, there are people that I know I can work with that are very good at their jobs, and that will add real value to the business. And I would identify some people like that and ask them to come and join me. But the interesting thing about that, Donal, is the young people today in our organisation. As I said, we have a good mixture of young people and experienced people. And again, we're in software and we have all this artificial intelligence stuff, predictive analytics, and really stuff way over my head. And it's driven...
Way over your head as a former computer science lecturer in Trinity.
As a former computer science lecturer in Trinity, yeah. It went way over my head when they introduced the mobile phone. But but when you see, you know, there's a lot of talk about young people. They get a lot of bad press. Mm-hmm. You've got all this millennial stuff and that. And my experience with young people is completely different. I mean, I think they energize me. I mean, we go in and you might have a group of people working on a project and you might say, listen, client, they want to do this, do you think we could shape it that way or whatever, and say, okay, leave it with us. And when you go back, they say, yeah, we're able to do that, but actually we can now do this and this and this along with it. And it's just, you're kind of blown away by it most of the time.
So they're pushing the boundaries of technology?
All the time. And I mean, I think, you know, like one of the tricks to running a successful business is to hire people smarter than yourself. Yeah. It's not difficult in my case, but you get but hiring those people and not being afraid. I think when you're younger, and so to younger people setting up in business or looking at things like that, you know, don't be afraid to take on people who are better than you. That's how you will make money, as I said earlier, and that's how you will grow your business. That's how you'll get better products, better services. it's by hiring people better than yourself in all of the different disciplines.
And is recruitment like the M&A, where you did that first meeting, that sit down, matters?
Yeah, I think it's like HR, even in the M&A space, is hugely important. If you said to me, I would say 75% of my job is HR. So with my immediate team, it's having the best people in the best positions as functional of that. And then that team has to spread it out through the organization as well, and getting that going. And when you're looking at M&A, there are cultural issues as well. So you're looking at a scenario where the ways people do things, and you may want to change them. How are they going to react to that? How does that work? You've got people who've been doing the same job for 20 years, and we're suddenly coming in and we're going to put a technology in there. Even with clients, it can be tricky enough dealing with that. So HR and interpersonal relationships, and understanding where people are coming from. You're not going to be able to satisfy everybody's needs on every occasion, but at least if you make the effort to understand, you can explain why, and it can be done. Yeah. But again, as if you're talking to people, or if you're being some kind of a dictator saying, this is how we're doing it, and that's the end of it. Yeah. It won't work.
We have time for questions now. Are there questions from the floor? Yep.
Hi, my name is Deirdre. I'm a lecturer here at NCI, so I'm used to talking. I wanted to just ask a little bit about your valuation process and how much is informed by your emotional intelligence, because you've spoken a good bit about that sort of in the last hour, and in particular corporate clarity, because it was easy to pick out the catman in terms of sort of, looking at your business, but then just in terms of the key decision makers and how that then feeds into your emotional intelligence, then feeds into your final valuation, and how you sort of think about that.
Do you say the account man?
No, the cat man.
Oh, the cat man.
Yes. Thank you.
So I might ask you to come back to that second part again. The first part about the valuations. So we're an unusual in our case. So again, different models for startups and people who are doing various rounds. But we're unusual. We're a technology company. We have a big investment in R&D, but we're a profitable company. And we still have to maintain that profitability, and we still have to maintain that cash flow generation. So when we look at an acquisition and putting a valuation on it, it's not that complex in a lot of ways. It comes down to a very simple question. How quickly can we get our money back is a very basic question in that. Now, there are other things. We will look at the recurring revenues, because as we grow and companies in our space, the equity value of the business is often measured by a multiple of subscriptions, recurring revenue, and that type of thing. So there are criteria around all of that, but when it comes to writing a check, it's generally around how quickly do we think we can get our money back. And back to the catman, what was your question on that one?
Your emotional intelligence in terms of looking at the people who are running the businesses that you're acquiring, notwithstanding obviously the metrics, and if the money works, the money works. But then if you sit down with somebody and you're trying to sort of overlay how you feel about the people involved, how does that impact potentially any valuation adjustments you might make, notwithstanding what the numbers are actually saying to you? So that's really kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So first of all, on the emotional intelligence, it's tricky. A lot, in my own case, comes down to experience. So I would spend, that opening meeting, which I kind of glanced at, went through, I would spend a lot of time in that conversation, understanding the person, understanding their motivation for selling, understanding the culture they have in their own organization. And then when I meet the management team, it's kind of a verification of that initial impression. And so it does, I guess when it comes to evaluation, there are different ways in which it can impact. So first of all, you're looking at gaps in your own organization. So you immediately look at a company and say, well, actually, we could do it her in that place and him in that place, or whatever it might be. So there could be immediate synergies like that where you can think, wow, that's great. It gets a bit trickier when you've got somebody there who's very good and somebody back there is very good. So it does feed into it. So the initial conversation with the principal or principals is one thing. If I felt it was a basket case, I'm trying to think of an example. Actually, the one we just did, we walked away from that one last September because we went in and we didn't have the resources in our place to kind of go and run that business, and we didn't think the management team was strong enough to do it. So even though it was a deal we wanted to do, we walked away from it simply because we felt we couldn't depend on that management team and we didn't have the resources to beef it up. Now we fed that back in and they did some restructuring over the following months, and we re-engaged in March or April.
One more question. Did anyone got a question there? Any question?
Are there any acquisitions that you have been disappointed with that haven't gone to plan the way you thought they were going to work out?
First of all, they rarely go the way I thought they'd go. So it's interesting because I don't think there's a single acquisition that I regret doing. They didn't all go to plan. Some of them had some real blow-ups in the first couple of months. But, that's what a management team is there for. You kind of go in and you fix it. But interestingly, when you asked the question, something came into my head, which is, again, I don't know, 20 years ago, there was a company in Ireland called Reflex Technology, and we were buying it. And we had everything done. And we got to Friday. It was supposed to close on Friday, and they hadn't given us the disclosure letter, which is kind of things you may not have seen that we now want to disclose to you. So we adjourned on the Friday, and they said they'd have it on Sunday. The bank drafted everything just to sign the document. And I went in on the Sunday, and they disclosed in the disclosure letter that the sales director had left and set up his own business. Now, to be honest with you, that wouldn't bother me. When you're in business, people go, they leave, they always attack the base. Again, I think it's a management issue how you deal with it. But I was a bit annoyed that they'd left it so late to tell me, and I got a bit of emotional. So I said, right, I want a reduction of price. And I remember the guy saying, he said to me, Maurice, don't do this. You're getting it cheap. Yeah, I know that's happened, but don't be an idiot. Just let's get on with it. And I said, nope, I got the hump. So I said to the team after, I said, tell you what, we still want to buy it, but he'll come back during the week and we'll get a deduction. And if he hasn't come back by Friday, I'll ring him up on Monday and say, okay, let's do the deal. And this is back in the day before mobiles and that. And Friday night, nothing. On Monday, Tuesday, nothing from them. Friday night, I went home. And in those days, to all you young people, there was teletext on the television. There was Airtel business pages. And it was kind of the first thing you look at. So I went home on Friday night, clicked on Airtel. The first story was that Reflex had sold their business to the sales director at 20% more than I was paying for it. And so it's back to that old thing, where it's not the things you do that you regret, it's the things you don't do. So it's interestingly, that's the one that even today I go, should have done that deal.
The one that got away.
The one that got away.
Maurice Healy, thank you very much. That's been absolutely fascinating. That is all we have time for. We're just on 2:00 now. So can we get a big round of applause for Maurice, first of all? And thanks very much to Professor Jimmy Hill and to the team here, the Marketing and Facilities team at the NCI, to our producer Dara Whelan and Gavin Hennessy on sound. Thank you for joining us here today at the Kelly Theatre at the NCI. This session will be available as a podcast on independentdiet.ie, on Apple and on Google Podcasts. So thank you all very much. Have a nice afternoon.